Couple of months ago, I was having coffee with my friends from high school, Artune and Jake, and Artune posed a question to us that I have been thinking about and sitting on for a couple of weeks now, as I have been trying to work through what my answer to this question would be. And his question was, what is your TV Mount Rushmore? Meaning, what are your top four, like, all time favorite television shows? And he obviously had had time to think about his, so he shared his with us. And I have been thinking about mine for so long, and I feel like there are a million different ways I could take this, different directions I could go. And I honestly thought it would be really good fodder for an episode of the podcast, since we're always talking about what we're consuming as well as what we're creating. So that is what today's episode is going to be all about. I'm going to be sharing it with you, my all time favorite, yes, TV shows, but also movies, books, and albums. I think that a person's favorite media says so much about who they are. So hopefully, this will give you even more insight into me as a person. And I would absolutely love to hear from you guys if you listen to this episode and try to come up with your own Mount Rushmore for, like I said, TV, movies, books, and albums. You could pick one category, you could do all four. I want to know because I really feel like our favorite TV shows, movies, books, and records show so much about our personalities and what we value in the world. So I am really excited to finalize my list with you guys here today. Some categories were easier for me than others, which we'll get into, and just have a fun, chatty episode today. So grab your favorite beverage. I have an iced chai latte in hand, and we will get into some all time favorites. But before we do that, let's first do a little create and consume. One thing that I was creating this week was my TikTok partnership with the Central Park Conservancy. You guys, of all of the brand partners that I've had, it is so crazy to think about me literally working with Central Park. Like, that is just a place that I have spent so many days in over the years. I have gone to birthday parties in Central Park. I had part of my bachelorette party in Central Park. I got engaged in Central Park, graduations, just beautiful summer days, beautiful fall days, maybe not so beautiful winter days, but still beautiful because it's Central Park. Like, I cannot believe that I got to spotlight Central Park and get paid to do so. That is absolutely wild to me. I will leave a link to the campaign video that's over on TikTok. I did also have some Instagram stories that I guess have technically expired, but they're probably in my brand work highlight on Instagram if I remembered to put them there. So I will leave a link to the TikTok though. That's kind of like the primary part of the campaign. And it was basically just all about Central Park and how beautiful it is. And I also added this kind of component of New Yorker math to it because I didn't even realize this, that 75% of Central Park's care and maintenance comes from donations. So the idea was kind of like, think of the cost of your subway swipe or a pretzel or any of the things that you kind of purchase on a daily basis in New York, and just the fact that you can donate at any amount. So, of all the causes to support and draw attention to, I'm thrilled that I was able to spotlight Central Park. So, thank you again to the Central Park Conservancy for working with me over on TikTok. I am just really happy with how that turned out. Also, my friend Taylor Morello helped me shoot that content in Central Park, which was really nice of her. I'll link her YouTube channel in the show notes too, in case you want to go check her out. If you guys like my YouTube channel, you'll definitely like her content too. Okay, and then for what I'm consuming this week, I actually bought this a little while ago, but I just tried it again last night. And I think I'm having mixed reviews on this, but I still wanted to share it and potentially like ask you guys for some feedback or suggestions if you have any. But I am still on a mission to figure out a heatless curls situation, specifically overnight, that can work for me. So if you're watching on YouTube, I last night slept in the curly tie, which is from the brand Sleepy Tie. They are known for their scrunchie that helps preserve a blowout, but they also have this kind of like sock curl method curler where you clip it in on the top of your head and then basically you wrap the hair around on each side. So it almost looks like you have pigtails going to bed, and the sock basically comes up and you wrap it around the hair to hold it in place. And then it actually has a little tie too, so that it really stays secure. So it didn't fall out throughout the night or anything. I did it on dry, clean hair last night. I was already messaging with my friend Francesca about this on Instagram. She said that sometimes it works better when her hair is a little bit damp, and also sometimes if she adds like a serum to it. So I might need to like retry this, but honestly, I don't know if I want to because it was still so uncomfortable to sleep in. And I don't necessarily think the results were so amazing that I'm willing to sacrifice a good night's sleep to get curly hair like that when I can easily kind of just like run my curling iron through my hair in about 10 minutes and get a similar look. So, if you guys have any other tips or tricks for heatless curls or overnight methods that work for you, I think this is particularly tricky for me too because I don't even know if I'm a side sleeper or not. I truly feel like I do a full 360-degree like rotisserie chicken rotation in my sleep. I feel like I do that at least 2 or 3 times throughout the night. So I move, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I'm not just perfectly sitting like a mummy. So maybe that's not the best method for me. I don't know, but I figured I'm testing it, I'm trying it. So, again, if you guys have any tips for me, please let me know what they are. And don't forget to let me know what you are creating and consuming too. Also, you guys, I know that I say this at the end of every episode, but if you have not yet subscribed to the podcast or followed wherever you are watching or listening, if you could pause and take 2 seconds to do that, and even better, if you could pause and take 2 seconds to leave a 5-star review and actually write a review on Apple Podcasts, you have no idea how insanely helpful that is for the show to let other people know that you're listening and to share what you like about the show. So thank you in advance to you guys who have already done that. I know that a lot of you have, but I did just want to mention it in case you've been listening for a while, but you're not actually following. Like, it's a really tiny, small, free way to support the show. And it would mean a lot to me if you are able to do that. With that being said, let's narrow down my Mount Rushmores of 4 different pop culture pillars. So, like I said, movies, albums, books, and TV. So, TV obviously was what my friend had first brought up, and that's kind of what sparked this whole thing. I think that's what I'm having the hardest time with because I think that is the media that I consume the most of out of all of these. So, I think I need to do the other categories first and work my way up to TV because that's the one I'm genuinely the most confused by. And you guys are going to sit with me and help me figure out for sure what this is. And I feel like this is fun too because you'll get to hear all of the potential contenders, like the kind of runner ups or honorable mentions that maybe don't make it onto the Mount Rushmore, and a little bit of my reasoning behind why all of these different forms of media have stuck with me for different reasons. And if this seems like a silly goose, like random episode of the podcast, it will be a little bit of that, but I actually think that doing this exercise or thinking about this for yourself is really helpful just in curating your own taste and being able to explain your taste like in music and in books and in movies to other people, whether that is, I don't know, if you're dating and you are having banter with someone on a date and you guys get into what types of movies you both watch and you realize that you have a similar taste, or even if you are looking for more tailored, personalized recommendations when you're browsing Netflix and stuff, like to be able to, I don't know if you guys know you can do this because I always forget on Netflix, but you can actually like things, you can add things to your lists, and that can help give it more information about what you like and provide even better recommendations for things. So it can help you find more things that you like that maybe you weren't initially thinking you would discover, in terms of, again, kind of curating your pop culture taste profile. So I think that is a cool way to think about this. I figured I would start this episode with the category that I struggled the least with, and that is movies. Now, you guys are going to hear these top 4 movies that are like my Mount Rushmore of movies. And you're going to be like, you have the most basic taste in the world. And I don't want my Mount Rushmore of movies to discourage you from listening to the rest of the episode if you hear these first 4 things and you're like, this is the most basic girl I've ever met in my life, because I promise it gets better and more nuanced. But I think the thing about me that you should know also is I really am not a big movie person. I truly love a classic, and I actually don't mind the experience of even going to the movies. I just feel like it is such a rarity now that so many things are on streaming. And I also feel like just over time, there are so many movies that come out that seem to have big budgets and big names behind them, but maybe don't have as much heart or as much of a focus on the story as I think there used to be, specifically like in the early aughts and even the 90s with movies, and before then, obviously. So I'm not a big movie consumer as it is. I personally would always rather watch like 3 or 4 episodes of one of my favorite TV shows than sit through an entire movie. So I don't know what that says about me, but I just wanted to give that as a little bit of background when I tell you my favorite movies. In no particular order, the 4 movies that would make it onto my movie Mount Rushmore are number 1, Clueless, number 2, The Devil Wears Prada, number 3, 27 Dresses, and number 4, this one's gonna make no sense now that you've heard the first 3, National Treasure. I understand this is an insane assortment, but let me back up and try to explain each one, because I actually think that there are different sub themes within all of these movies. But in my head, this is like, if I could only watch 4 movies for the rest of my life, I would always come back to these 4. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. So, starting with Clueless, obviously, I love Clueless. Not only is it great like as a standalone film, but if you don't know, it's an adaptation of Jane Austen's Emma. I'm named after Jane Austen, and I love this literary tie in. And I love the idea of taking a classic like Emma and telling it in a modern lens. And that is exactly what the 1995 Clueless with Alicia Silverstone and Paul Rudd absolutely did. That movie is something I'm always happy to come back to. So many iconic lines. The fashion. I actually, when I was working at Interview Magazine, got to interview Mona May, who was the costume designer for Clueless. If that article still exists on Interview's website, I will be sure to link it in the show notes, because Mona is fantastic and was so generous with her time back when I was an assistant editor at Interview, and she took the time to speak to me. And I just am absolutely obsessed with Clueless. Like, it's a perfect film in my eyes, and that's obviously a 90s, film too. Clueless could be considered a romance, but I honestly see Clueless as a big friendship story. Like, when I think of Clueless, I think of the 3 girls, I think of Ty's makeover, I think of Dion, and I think of them all navigating kind of the different stages of their relationships and their friendship dynamics, and what that looks like throughout the course of the school year. And I think it's a very much like a coming of age story too. So that is kind of my perfect like teenage movie, I would say. Okay, Devil Wears Prada. And no, before you ask, I've not seen the sequel yet. I actually really need to get to the sequel, and I think it would be fun after I see that to do a podcast episode talking a little bit more about my like prior career in magazines and what my career looks like now. And I definitely want to like watch it and share my thoughts with you. So I haven't seen it yet, but the original is such a classic. Like, the cast is stacked. Again, the one-liners are amazing. This is also an adaptation based on a book. And while there are a couple of things that, are slightly problematic or haven't aged as well, like, kind of a lot of negative body talk and things like that, I think for the most part, this movie actually does hold up really well. And I think that is a testament to the writing. And I think it's also a testament to the performances the actors delivered. And this, for me, kind of fills the bucket of a career movie, like a question of ambition and how far are you willing to go to get what you want, and what does success really look like to you. And as someone who spent, the majority of their like late teenage years and then most of their 20s, I would say, thinking a lot about career and ambition, this was always kind of something that I came back to. And as someone, again, who actually went on to work in magazines in New York, it was really like giving me hope and giving me kind of a blueprint in my head for what things could potentially look like. You could be attending Paris Fashion Week. You could get to know different publishers and things. Probably not any who would actually ever give you an unpublished manuscript to a book like Harry Potter, but aside from that, you still get to meet and network with a lot of great people. 27 Dresses is my perfect rom-com. It is my perfect rom-com. And I also want to say, I think it's so funny that for the most part, I don't actually watch most of these actors in a lot of other things. Like, this is how I know Katherine Heigl. I don't know her from anything else. I've never really watched Grey's Anatomy or anything like that. James Marsden is really the only one who I continue to follow, because James Marsden is one of my favorite actors, obviously. And I just absolutely love this movie. It is the perfect, like, enemies to lovers story. It involves journalism. It involves a wedding in New York, it involves sister rivalry, it involves workplace questions. Like, oh my God, there are so many layers to this movie. And it's just something I will always, always watch. Like if I'm flipping channels, not that I'm really doing that ever anymore, and that movie is on though, like I'm sitting and watching. I don't care what point in it we're at. I don't care if there's 6 minutes left. Like I'm sitting there to watch. Because actually the last 6 minutes of that movie are amazing. That was kind of a random thing for me to say. Okay, and then lastly, National Treasure. This is my like version of an adventure film. I actually almost honestly thought about putting the Project Hail Mary movie on this list just because I loved it so much and because, again, see so few movies, but I really enjoyed that one. But National Treasure is just like perfect as it is. So, again, it's one of those movies I always come back to. I always make us watch it every year on the 4th of July. I actually just made Andrew watch it with me a couple weeks ago because I feel like we're not going to get around to it this year on the 4th of July. But it's just so much fun. I actually love all of the moral and ethical questions posed in this movie. Like, is doing something wrong justified if you were preventing someone else from doing the wrong thing in the first place to like get it into better hands? Obviously, there's a little romance B plot, but again, it's also a story just about history, discovery, whether or not you believe the tales that were told to you by your ancestors. Like, I actually just they did good with National Treasure. And again, I am not even that big of like a Nicolas Cage watcher. Most of these other actors, again, like I said, I mostly know them through National Treasure. And to me, it's like a perfect film. And also, all of these movies are a good length. Movies today are getting way too long, and that's where I think they lose me with the attention. Okay, so now that we've gone through movies, I think you see the direction I'm going with this here, right? Okay, so one more time, top 4 movies of all time: Clueless, Devil Wears Prada, 27 Dresses, National Treasure. Okay, let's move on to albums. Now, this was also an interesting one because albums played such a key part in my life growing up, like actually going to a store, buying an album, having a whole CD that you're holding in your hand and everything. I feel like these days there are very few artists where I will actually go to Spotify and try to listen to their albums from start to finish, just the way that they were clearly intended to be listened to. Like track lists are chosen for a reason, songs are put in a specific order for a reason. And I do think that the experience of listening to an album from beginning to end is kind of becoming a bit of a lost art. I feel like it was so much easier, obviously, with CDs and with record players. With streaming, Spotify, Apple, all the things, it does get a little cloudy sometimes. And I recommend going back to some of your favorite albums and listening through them start to finish, because I actually did that a little bit in preparation for this. And I really enjoyed what I heard. So, thinking in that way, I feel like a lot of what I'm going to share are slightly older albums, like primarily from the early 2010s, I would say. But there's one new one that's kind of in the mix that could potentially be there, and then there's one older one. Let me start with the two that for sure are going up there, like no questions. So the first one is Folklore by Taylor Swift. And if you guys don't know, I did a whole other episode where I rank every Taylor Swift album. So I can link that in the show notes in case you haven't listened to it yet. If you enjoyed today's episode, definitely go back and listen to that one too, because that is very just specifically focused on Taylor Swift. But Folklore, I just think is a timeless album. Again, I could listen to it any time of year, any day of the week. Like, I love every single song on that album. I think it's amazing. I think it's one of her best of all time. Not my personal favorite, according to that rankings episode that I did, but again, you could go back and listen to that one if you want to hear me get into that. I just think it is, like, as a songwriter for her best album when you look at lyrics and when you think about the range and the storytelling and the fact that such a quieter album could be so powerful when she has done so many more vocal and pop centric and more statement making albums. This one still speaks volumes, even though she's not like screaming at you. And then another one is American Idiot by Green Day. I did have the CD for this one, and I can tell you I like literally probably played it so many times that it started to disintegrate essentially, like, when a CD would start skipping and stuff. I think it was just from overuse and over listening. I also became obsessed when American Idiot was on Broadway. I went to see it twice. Like, I just absolutely love that album. Everything is so catchy, everything fits so well together. All of the little one liners in there and all of the songs that are, in some ways, many ways, still true today. I just think that Billy Joe Armstrong is so talented, like a once in a generation kind of talent. I actually got to interview him when I worked at Nylon. If I can find that article, I know it was for the print magazine. It may have gone on the website. If I can find that, I'll link it in the show notes too. Getting to actually talk to him was like one of the craziest experiences of my life. It was just a phone interview, but still. Okay, and so those are very different. And I would say that Taylor Swift is kind of timeless, just like she is my favorite artist, and she is like the artist of my generation in my world to me. And then I feel like Green Day and American Idiot represents a very like angsty kind of like preteen, but also still, potentially confused or angry adult vibe too. And I feel like that's timeless as well to me. So I feel like in some ways I've almost got like the indie pop genre covered with Folklore, and I've got rock covered with Green Day. So now, God, what else do I add in? So these are the other contenders that I need to talk through with you guys. Okay. Lady Gaga, The Fame Monster. That is one of my favorite pop albums of all time for sure. But some of the other similar ones that I feel like could be competing for the same spot in here are Melodrama by Lorde. That album to me just sounds like college because I played it literally nonstop when it came out when I first moved to the city. I was also thinking about Ellie Goulding's album Halcyon Days. So that was her, I guess, second album after Lights. And there's so many great songs on Lights too, but Halcyon Days, again, specifically to me, feels like that just moved to New York, like young adult period in my life that I also associate Melodrama with. And I feel like that is kind of a spot that deserves to be featured on the Mount Rushmore because I feel like it's such a formative time in your life to be at college, to kind of be on your own for the first time and to have like the soundtrack of your life playing. So I kind of have those as a potential category. I honestly recently have just loved Olivia Dean's album, The Art of Loving, and she won Best New Artist at the Grammys. And I just feel like this is an album that, again, just goes so beautifully all together. Like one song really just feels like it flows into the next one. It feels like you're the main character of your own life story when you're listening to it. Oh my God, there's so much that I love about that album. I think it's a little too new for me to put it up on the Mount Rushmore, but the fact that it even like made it onto my brainstorming list of what would go up there, I think speaks volumes about it. Now, I also have two albums in my head. This is a little bit similar to having a Green Day album up there, but I did also write down Night Visions by Imagine Dragons and Hot Fuss by The Killers, which these are two very iconic albums to me, especially in the genre of, rock and kind of early 2000s, or Night Visions may have even been a little bit later 2000s. But the fact that Night Visions was Imagine Dragons' first album, like, what a debut. Like, that is insane. So that's another potential slot. And then I also have my very early 2000s, like, records that I know the words of every song to, even the kind of hidden songs in the back, and that really just made me feel something the first time I heard them. One of them is Metamorphosis by Hilary Duff, and the other one is Let Go by Avril Lavigne. And I did get to see Avril Lavigne last summer in concert at Madison Square Garden. I did not sadly get Hilary Duff tickets for this year, and I'm really sad about it. So let's think about this. So obviously, again, we already have Taylor Swift and we have Folklore. I do feel like Lady Gaga, The Fame Monster, needs to be up there. I feel like it just had so much impact on me. I feel like that is the true pop album that I would want to represent, my favorite musical genres up on Mount Rushmore. Just so many good songs on that one. I feel like she really found her footing. I feel like that album put her on the map even more so than The Fame did. I feel like this just turned the volume up, The Fame Monster. And again, like I could happily listen to that album from start to finish at any time. Now I'm confused about what to do in this last slot because a lot of these kind of feel like they have overlap with what's up there already. I honestly feel like The album that I know the best and that also kind of fills a void of something that I don't think is up there yet is Let Go by Avril Lavigne, because I feel like this encapsulates pop punk, and I feel like this encapsulates a little bit emo too. Like, I feel like it touches on the emo genre. You know, I thought about Infinity on High, the Fall Out Boy album. I thought about A Fever You Can't Sweat Out, which is Panic at the Disco. I love a lot of songs from those albums, but as far as album as a whole goes, like, that's really what I'm looking at for this and what I think is going to have to help me make decisions about it. So that's why they weren't initially on the list, because I know probably like 4 to 5 songs from those albums really well, but truly, like, from top to bottom, which album is it? I think I'm going Avril. Okay, so then actually in order of, I guess, when they came out, I'm taking a guess here. I think it would be Let Go by Avril Lavigne, American Idiot by Green Day, The Fame Monster by Lady Gaga, and Folklore by Taylor Swift. I actually really like that. I think that I'm touching on as much as I can in one place, and I think that gives me something for every mood. Obviously, like, it's kind of similar to how I feel about Taylor Swift and the fact that she has so many different eras of her music, is that there really is a Taylor Swift album for every occasion, which is why she is consistently and without fail my number one artist on Spotify every year. But I think those are going to be the 4 winners. So the runner ups then are Melodrama by Lorde, Halcyon Days by Ellie Goulding, Night Visions by Imagine Dragons, the Art of Loving by Olivia Dean, Hot Fuss by The Killers, Metamorphosis by Hilary Duff. Okay, so I think I'm good on that. And I'm actually feeling pretty good going into this next category, which is going to be my top 4 books of all time. Now, this is interesting too, because I know I talk a lot about books on the podcast, and I have gotten back into reading for the last like 2 to 3 years. I want to say I've been reading pretty consistently, but I just want to mention that there was a really big break in my reading, to the point where I was maybe reading like 1 or 2 books a year, and most of them were more kind of career focused, or like, I don't know, I bought like Ami Song's book and Tez's book, which were a lot more like how to take pictures for Instagram versus like real literature kind of things. So I just wanted to say there was a really big break in my reading. And if you have fallen off of reading for a while, I just want to say that was me for a bit, and you can jump back in at any time. And honestly, for the 4 books on my Mount Rushmore, I do feel like there's something here for everyone. So if you've been needing something to pull you back in to books and to reading, I think you might like what's on my list. Okay, so again, I feel like choosing 1 book per category of my reading interests was really helpful in this situation. So I have a pretty definitive top 4 books. Number 1 on my books Mount Rushmore is in the memoir/nonfiction category, and that is The Year of Magical Thinking by Joan Didion. Joan Didion is just, we're so lucky to have experienced Joan Didion in our lifetime. What a beautiful, beautiful writer. Her work is just so distinctive. It just feels so her, and like impossible to duplicate or replicate her voice and what she did. Just, oh my God, nothing but respect for Joan Didion. She sadly passed in 2021. But okay, so this book, The Year of Magical Thinking, this is actually like the saddest book I think I've ever read in my entire life. And if you don't know, for context, just a little bit about the plot, it's basically about her husband dying unexpectedly and dealing with her daughter, who had this like mysterious illness at the time. And I haven't read this in years. I honestly feel like I'm due for a reread, but just the way that she talks about life and her experiences and her memories, it is so like, it just sees right through you and cuts to your core. And I feel like this book makes me remember what I love so much about writing, and why storytelling is so important, to be able to share your lived experiences and your perspectives with other people, and to be able to communicate through the written word, which I fear is very much becoming a lost art these days. And I don't know, it just really, it's one of those books that reminds you that you're a human being, and that it's okay to feel your emotions, and that there are ways to process your emotions and have new experiences and expand your worldview, even when it feels very narrow. And that is what I absolutely love about this book. So that's the plot. It's obviously not the most exciting or happy book by any means, but it is so well written that it has to be up there. And I'm absolutely due for a reread of that one. Okay, for perfect summer romance, I have to go with Every Summer After by Carly Fortune. Carly has become basically an author that I have read her entire catalog of. I actually just bought her new book that came out this month, Our Perfect Storm. We're going to be reading it for book club, and that's her fifth book. And I have read all of her previous books, including Every Summer After, which was actually her debut. I just absolutely loved this book. I loved the setting. I loved the like then and now timelines that the book was being told in. I always love being introduced to characters at the present moment and then working our way backwards to start to uncover and dig a little bit more about like what actually happened here beneath the surface. And I also loved that the setup of this led into her book that she came out with last year, which was One Golden Summer. So you kind of get to still go back to that world and like live with those characters, but see things from a different perspective. And if you just need like a really breezy read, a great summer romance, I do recommend it. They are also adapting this. I forget which streamer it's going to be on, but it's going to be called Every Year After, and it's going to come out as a series this summer. So if you are looking for like a pairing in that way, you could also read the book and then watch the show. Very exciting for her. And I'm sure I'll report back in a couple of weeks after I get to read her new book that just came out too, but had to put that one up there. And, I almost put The Summer I Turned Pretty on here by Jenny Han, but it's just such a YA book. And I do obviously love it so much, but I just felt like Every Summer After is like a better representation of my current reading taste and what it qualifies to be on my Mount Rushmore. And don't worry, we still have the TV section because that got adapted last year. So we're not done talking about The Summer I Turned Pretty. Okay, in the classic fiction category, I guess you could even call this literary fiction, on my Mount Rushmore is This Time Tomorrow by Emma Straub. I absolutely loved this book. I loved the writing in this book. I loved the world building in this book. I loved every character in this book. It's amazing how much you can put into just so many pages. This Time Tomorrow is like a book that I think about all the time. It's a really sweet story. This woman, Alice, who lives in New York City and works at a college prep school uptown, she is basically approaching her 40th birthday, like thinking about her life choices, and she's also dealing with her ailing father. They don't exactly know what's wrong with him, and so she's kind of just a little bit at a crossroads of her life, and she's thinking a lot about the past and what has happened and what has led her up to this point. And you really get to see in this book a lot of different things play out, including the consequences of your own decisions and thinking about just how much time you get with people and what you do with the time you get with people. And it definitely had me teary-eyed at many points throughout this book. It had me laughing. It had me trying to rush through the pages to get to the next page. And I just really, really enjoyed this one. And then for business/career, I'm actually going to put Shoe Dog up here by Phil Knight. Now, this is a book that Andrew has had on our bookshelf for years and that I read while we were on our honeymoon 2 years ago. And if you don't know, Phil Knight is the founder of Nike. And what I love about Shoe Dog is it does give you a lot of typical business lessons, but it's not told in like chapter 1, open an LLC. It's very much told in first person memoir style. And you really get to see just how many mistakes were made along the way. Sorry to Phil Knight. I'm sure he knows this since he wrote the book, obviously. But when you think about the company that Nike is now and how very clearly it is a success story, and then you really start to see all of the places where you almost lose everything and you're thinking there's no way this can work, and there's a lawsuit, and you're thinking, well, that's the end of this, right? Like there's no way to keep going. And the fact that he was able to keep going and that they did find ways to pivot, correct things where they were wrong, try something else, try this other thing, risk it all with this. Like it was a really cool look into how such a public company that is very clearly thriving now again had to work its way up to get there. And I think there's, again, like I said, a lot of takeaways and business lessons in there without it having to read like a textbook of how to run a business. So wanted to put that up there too. And then a couple of other honorable mentions in the romance category. I loved Book Lovers by Emily Henry. This was another book where I was just like smiling ear to ear. It's definitely enemies to lovers. You're kind of like flipping all the way through, trying to figure out what's going on. And I love that the protagonist is kind of like the anti protagonist in a sense. So her name is Nora and she's a literary agent. And it's kind of like a running joke that all of her boyfriends, in a Hallmark movie when a guy is like dating a mean girl in the city and then he goes to the Christmas tree farm and he falls in love with like the daughter of the Christmas tree farm owner. And she's like the mean city girl who that guy always seems to like be leaving and finding someone better. And it's almost like a joke because she's a literary agent. And again, she's very aware of like these tropes and the fact that like she is really career focused and maybe not always the most patient person and all this stuff. But I love that Nora is kind of not your typical protagonist, but that she still gets to have her romance journey in kind of an unexpected way in Book Lovers. I also loved Mad Honey by Jodi Picoult and Jennifer Finney Boylan. This, I would say, is kind of suspense slash like courtroom fiction a little bit, but there are so many layers to this story. It's also coming of age. It also has to do with family. It also has to do with deception and dynamics. And I love that these two co-wrote the book together. And once you finish it, it's really interesting to like hear more about the authors and hear more about the process of them co-writing the book, as they talked about, I think in the acknowledgement section, or maybe they did an epilogue or something. But like the plot twists in this book and the way that the layers were peeled back, I thought was done so well. And if you don't know, Jenny Boylan was actually my professor at Barnard, and she just gave the commencement speech for 2026. So shout out to her. That's very exciting. And I would also add probably Atomic Habits by James Clear on here too as an honorable mention. Again, so much of it is common sense, but when you actually sit down and read everything and see examples of it play out in real time, I personally, I love recommending that as a top of the year read, like when you're setting your goals and stuff. I feel like it's just a good reminder for all of us that like habits are our choices. And if we're not happy with what our life looks like, we can implement better habits and create better choices for ourselves to literally change our lives. So I really love that one too. Okay, but just to recap, the 4 books on my Mount Rushmore for literature are The Year of Magical Thinking by Joan Didion, Every Summer After by Carly Fortune, This Time Tomorrow by Emma Straub, and Shoe Dog by Phil Knight. All right, we've made it to TV, and this is where I need your help. So I've got exactly nothing set in stone in the TV category, but I do have the 4 categories that I think I want to fill my Mount Rushmore with. I think the way this is going to shake out is I'm going to have one comfort show on here. I'm going to have one 30-minute comedy. I'm going to have one gripping or really like interesting, makes you think kind of show. And then I'm going to have one reality, because that is a big part of my life and personality. If you guys don't know, I've already done, I think, at least 2 episodes about reality TV on the podcast. So I can link those in the show notes again if you're enjoying the pop culture chats and want to listen to more when this episode is done. Okay, so let's think about this. I think the hardest category is going to be my comfort shows, because there are just so many of them. Like, these are shows that I have rewatched probably at least 2 or 3 times. For many of them, it's way more than that, to an embarrassing degree. And they're the shows that I can put on just in the background while I'm cooking, while I'm cleaning, when I just need a little bit of comfort, Okay, now this list is all over the place, of course, but on this list right now is Gossip Girl, Gilmore Girls, Felicity, which, if you don't know, is a show from like the late 90s, early 2000s about a girl who follows her crush to New York City for college. Sounds insane. Great show. Psych, which is, it's like literally one of the funniest shows of all time. One of my true favorites, which is about a detective who pretends to have psychic powers to solve crimes. The Summer I Turned Pretty. As I told you, this was going to come up again. This is an adaptation of my favorite childhood book. And it was so perfectly executed. And we don't even have the movie yet. So that had to be in there too. And then Sex and the City. Okay, so these are just the comfort watches. It's really so hard because all of these shows in different ways represent like true, just different points of my life. Like Sex and the City when I first moved to college, the summer I turned pretty, last summer apparently. Gossip Girl was on when I was in high school. Felicity I watched right before going to college with my mom. Psych I watched growing up in high school. I don't know. This one is so hard. I think I need to do the others first, actually, and come back to this. Okay, so for gripping slash interesting shows, these are just shows that I think about all the time, like that I kind of always come back to for different reasons. One of them is White Collar, which is amazing, starring Matt Bomer. It's about a criminal, like an art thief, who becomes a criminal informant for the FBI, and specifically the bond that he forms with the person who's his handler at the FBI. Shot in New York, just there's art, there's drama, there's lying, there's excitement, there's everything you could want in a show. Like, so good. Then there's also The Good Place, which I would put it in the 30-minute comedy slot too, but as much as this show is funny, I feel like there is so much more depth to it than that. So that's why I kind of have it in this category. And then actually, is this the only scripted show that hasn't finished yet? Yeah, I put Paradise on here, you guys, because I am still thinking about Paradise. So season 2 just wrapped, and I know that they got renewed for season 3, which I think is going to be the final season. So maybe it's a little hard for me to justify putting a show on here when I don't know how it ends yet. Minus obviously the reality category where like new seasons are being filmed. But I think for gripping interesting, like I do think The Good Place needs to be up here. And one thing about me too is when I like a TV show, I will go as deep into the fandom as the internet and the waters allow me to dive deep into. So, for example, with The Good Place, I have also listened to the entirety of The Good Place, the podcast, which, if you love The Good Place, I highly recommend going in and listening to the podcast. Every episode has one actor from the show and one crew member, whether that was like a director or a costume person or a props assistant or whoever, being interviewed by Mark Evan Jackson, who plays Sean. Fantastic interviewer. And oh my God, just there's so much there. And I so appreciate like Mike Schur and Kristen Bell and like hearing every single person who was working on that show talk about the show and what it meant and what it represented. I think that has to be up there. I think that's definitely on my Mount Rushmore. Okay, let's figure out which reality show is going up there. Now, again, some of this is just like how deeply sucked in am I? Because I did put The Bachelor on here, but I haven't even like seen every season of The Bachelor, and obviously the franchise is like kind of having a hot mess moment right now because if you know, you know. We don't have time to get into that today. I did put Love is Blind on here too. Again, haven't seen every season, but just like when that show is on, I'm invested. I need to know what's happening. And I listen to a lot of podcasts that recap reality shows, specifically like Game of Roses and Dear Shandy, that mostly recap like the dating franchises, but are also kind of starting to cover some of these other shows where if a person was introduced through one particular franchise, they might get funneled into another reality show after that. I also have The Amazing Race on here, which obviously I love watching, and Andrew and I are trying to work our way through as many old seasons of The Amazing Race as we can. Like, we ideally want to watch every season of that show. We talk all the time about, like, what would it be like if we went on The Amazing Race? I think that would be so cool. Then I also have Project Runway. That was like something that was truly my window into fashion growing up in a New Jersey suburb. And then I have Traders, which might be what I need to put up here because Traders to me allows me still all of the other franchises. Like there are people on Traders from The Bachelor, from competition shows like Big Brother and Survivor and The Amazing Race, from Love Island. I mean, that I love the Traders so much. I literally applied to be on the civilian version and I didn't get a call back, sadly. I think it's shooting right now in Scotland. So, but I'm looking forward to that airing. And I just love watching that show too. Oh God, it's either Traitors or Amazing Race. Let's at least get that out of the way. Okay, when I look at my comedy contenders, I had written down 30 Rock, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and Silicon Valley. I think 30 Rock is the clear winner here for me, just because that show is so smartly written. Every single little mini joke is actually a perfect comedy moment. And if you stop and watch the show with careful eyes and you watch all of those little intricate moments, it is actually so funny when it all comes together. Even though it's very eccentric at sometimes, it also has so many relatable moments too. And again, that's one series that like I quote all the time. I just think is so expertly done. I feel like that is Tina Fey's like legacy in a sense, in addition to SNL. I absolutely love 30 Rock, so I think that needs to be in my comedy slot. Okay, wait, so have I made any decisions here other than that? Okay, wait, yes, okay. The Good Place, not the food place, the Good Place. Just typing on my phone, sorry. Okay, The Good Place is my interesting show. 30 Rock was my comedy show. God, what comfort watch do I put up here? I mean, realistically speaking, I can't imagine not being able to rewatch Gossip Girl or Gilmore Girls. I literally just finished a Gilmore Girls rewatch and I just started a Gossip Girl rewatch. I mean, Gossip Girl has been in my life for a lot longer. Obviously, I watched that show while it was airing. For some reason, I didn't become a Gilmore Girls watcher until I think like 4 or 5 years ago was the first time I actually watched it all the way through. And now, obviously, I'm obsessed. I've seen the whole thing, I think 3 times at this point. And I listened to a podcast called Gilmore to Say, which is all about Gilmore Girls and breaks down the show. And like, I love that discourse and that commentary too. I'm also looking at the wall in my office. And you want to know what's on the wall of my office? A framed copy of New York Magazine with the Gossip Girl cast on it from what year was that even? Probably like 2008. You know what it says? You know what the text says on the cover? I'll put it on the screen if you're watching on YouTube. It says, Best Show Ever. And I agree. Oh my God, I love Gossip Girl so much. Okay, we're putting Gossip Girl up here. That's number 3. Now, do I fill in with Traitors or The Amazing Race? This is for the last slot. I mean, when I think about The Amazing Race, I think about adventure. I think about all of the seasons that I watched with my mom when I was in high school. I think of all the seasons I've been watching with Andrew over the years and how we have like date nights for that and stuff too. But we also love doing that with Traders, and I love the setup and the game, like the true game aspect of Traders. I don't know, in both of those shows, you obviously have to be athletic to a certain degree to participate in challenges and do things, but I love also the mental games associated with it too, and how oftentimes the person who ends up on top in those situations is not always the most physically fit person, so to speak, but can be the person who figures out exactly what moves they need to make at what specific time. And I love seeing that all play out. God, why is this so hard? Oh my God. This is truly such a toss up for me. Here's one thing that might put one over the edge that I just thought of, which is if this is kind of a representation of me and my taste, I would say that Traders edges out a little bit, because 2 things about Traders that you don't get in The Amazing Race is the costumes and the outfits. That is one big component of the show that obviously during The Amazing Race you're just wearing like athletic clothing, which makes sense. And also, growing up as an only child, it was always my dream to just like have people to play games with. Like my parents could only take so many rounds of Clue, you know, but like I could have sat and played like literally for hours. I think there is something in me that truly just loves a game where everyone is at maximum participation. And to me, that honestly is Traders. Okay, I can't believe I'm saying this because I really thought I would end up picking The Amazing Race, but I think Traders has edged it out just slightly. But please know that The Amazing Race is very important to me as well. But we have to wrap up this recording. I've been literally talking about this for over an hour at this point. I will cut down the episode so it's shorter for you guys, but we made it. Okay, so my Mount Rushmore of TV, to answer a question my friend posed to me in a coffee shop 6 months ago, is The Good Place, 30 Rock, Gossip Girl, and Traitors. That is also an insane lineup. That officially brings us to the end of this episode. Let me know what you guys thought of today's episode. And of course, if you have opinions, if you have your own Mount Rushmores in any of these categories that you want to share with me, leave them in the comments if you're watching on YouTube, or if you're listening on Spotify, you could send me an email with your full breakdowns. You could leave a comment on any of our social media accounts. You can find us everywhere at Create and Consume Pod. And I will talk to you guys all again next week. Thank you again for being here and chatting with me today.